Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to work in this wonderful place. It has a purity of spirit. It's a spiritual place, quite distinct feeling, emotion, vibration, power that's been built up over the years, and with your help. But I'm here today to say thank you very much, and we're going to begin by me talking about spiritualism, which is my love, my life, and it's my guide, really. It guides me through life. Spiritualism is a recognized religion in many, many countries, and it's opening up, and now we've got ministers in Hong Kong, Russia, people that are interested in spiritualism throughout the world. It's like all conventional religions because we pray to God, we believe in God, we believe in the ministry of angels. So we have a lot of beliefs that are linked very much still to Christianity in a way. Where we have the addition of believing that we can communicate with the unseen world. And we believe that they love communicating with us. And that's the joy, that they love to be here and just say, I've just called to tell you that I love you. And that's what it's about, you know. And there's nothing more purer than actually taking part in a demonstration of mediumship, and then after just hearing the spirit world and the sigh of relief, she felt me. He knew I was there. That comfort and compassion and that understanding and that love for the unseen world is absolutely tremendous. However, let me start at the beginning of the history of spiritualism. And with slide 1, all the cultures for thousands and thousands of years have believed we can communicate, whether it's been with angels, whether it's been with a form of deity. Throughout every tradition, there's always been that joy of communication. And I loved that idea. But many years ago, in the beginnings of modern day spiritualism, as we call it, modern day spiritualism, it started with 2 children. That's how it all began, just with 2 children. And what they heard was, and that's how it all started. And these raps kept going on. And eventually these 2 children started to play with these raps. And they found out they could tap out a message, and they found that they could communicate with someone in the unseen world. You can imagine what their parents must have thought. They lived in a very, very small house in Hydesville, Wayne County. Modern day spiritualism began in the United States of America. That's where it all comes from. It began here. Its history is here. So let me tell you about the Fox sisters. That's the house that they lived in. So as you can see, it's not very large. So I should imagine when they heard, everybody in the house heard it. But the children actually built up a code in which they could communicate. And suddenly there was a phenomena that started to happen. And some people have the wrong impression of working with the spirit world because they believe, that the spirit world are here to tell us how to live our lives. And that's not what it's about at all. Because this gentleman that actually was doing the wrappings had been buried in the cellar of that home. And actually, he got so involved with the Fox sisters that he actually said, what I want you to do is to have me buried in sacred ground. So it actually starts to make us recognize that we can support the other world, and not necessarily is that world to support us, but that we can support them. And again, that makes you feel uplifted. And they actually went out, it became a phenomena. They were taken to New York. They had to produce wrappings and table levitation. They had to do a lot of things because they were the pioneers of modern day spiritualism. Lilydale is the next place I want to talk to you about, because, and we're going to move on, if we can, to slide 2, if we could, please. Now, if we look, I'm sorry, I've jumped ahead there. This lady here is an English lady. She comes from actually very close by where I lived, where she lives. And she came over to America as an actress. That's what she'd come to do. An agent had seen her on the platform in England and had decided, yes, I'd like her in America. So she got the boat, she came over, she arrived at the theatre thinking she was going to have work, and no work happened. And they all used to sit in the little back rooms waiting to see if anybody would give them work. And suddenly the communication started again, and the tables started to lift, and the communication began. And Emma Hardinge Britten became the most prominent medium of her day. Now, what we've got to remember, ladies, is that we have a lot of freedom today, don't we? In Emma's day, actually trying to talk to men about things that only men talked about, such as the Masons, such as government, such as things going into outside the norm of what women's duties were. She was a phenomena again in her own right, because she travelled across the United States. And the trains that she was in was those very old-fashioned trains where they used to have to stoke up and they have to fill with water. And she was on the train, and the train pulled in actually to have more fuel. And she heard a voice, and her voice said to her, "Emma, get off the train." And it was the middle of the night, and there was no way that Emma was going to get off that train. And the voice came again, "Emma, get off the train." So she still didn't move. And the third time the voice came, actually what she did was she picked herself up and she asked the conductor to put her bags outside off the train, and she got off. And the conductor said to her, "Madam, when we pull out of here, you're going to be in total darkness. And there's nobody will arrive here till tomorrow morning. And you're in the middle of nowhere. It's a wilderness." And I wonder what I would have done if I'd heard a voice. I think I'd have got back on the train myself. But actually she didn't get back on the train, she stayed. She got off the train pulled out, she went into total darkness. And about an hour later, actually, she heard a horse and cart coming up. And the gentleman stopped with his horse and cart and he said, "So you're the lady the spirit world has told me to come and get." And that's how Emma, it gives you goosebumps, doesn't it? It does me. Throughout my life on this journey, I've often used that story to help me to have the courage to keep going. And it would take courage to keep going, because when she eventually got to the little town in the prairie, where she was to speak and demonstrate, she had to be locked in to the, I can't remember, the courtroom, and they were there with their guns, because nobody wanted Emma to speak, because it was against everything they believed in. So of course it was a very Christian values, all this, that and the other, so she wasn't going to be allowed to speak at all. And yet she got up, and there they are with the hobnail boots and the guns, and she gave the philosophy and the demonstration of a lifetime. So all through her life, this lady, this ordinary lady, actually created so much and gave young mediums and mediums of my age the opportunity to work in freedom, because without people like Emma, we wouldn't have been free. When I started in this movement, they were still locking us out and throwing and lifting Bibles and saying to us, "Don't suffer a witch to live." And that was still happening. But in Emma's day, it must have been horrendous. It must have been horrendous. Eventually, she toured the United States of America, and then she went back to England, and she created, she was part of the creation of the two worlds and the 7 principles of spiritualism. And the 7 principles came through because of a man who was trying to stop slavery. He really was a great fighter for the right for people to have freedom. And he was in the spirit world, and he gave her the 7 principles. There were more than 7, but eventually we've ended up with 7 principles of spiritualism, which very, very difficult to live by. But they're principles, they're not commandments. And principles are hard to live by. Commandments, you've got to do as you're told. And again, this is another thing that actually drew me to the philosophical side of spiritualism. If we could move to slide 3, please. Now, I didn't want to move away from the United States of America too quickly, because here you see the first spiritualist camp of free thinkers. So all the mediums and all the free thinkers, the philosophical thinkers, actually went to Lilydale, and they created a town. It's their own town. And it's the most remarkable place to go. And I've been privileged to visit Lilydale, and thankfully I'm going to go back and work there again, because all the pioneers of freedom, and not just mediums, but also suffragettes, free thinkers, they all congregated there. And they started a movement up that allowed people to follow their religion as they wanted to do and not be browbeaten, and mediums could work. And here you might see that there's a stump of a tree, and that's where the speakers and the demonstrators would go, in the middle of the forest in God's kingdom, and would demonstrate. People are quite surprised usually when they're hearing us speak about spiritualism that we talk about God so much, but we do, because he's the integral part. That power that's within has actually allowed us to be mediums, and that's the task that God assigned us when we came here, was to be mediums, and I think that's rather remarkable. And so to see people speaking there is absolutely wonderful. And it is in this forest, and you're surrounded by all this beauty, God's kingdom. And if you ever get the chance to go, you should go, because it's a remarkable place. And if you are a medium or a spiritualist, then goodness gracious me, go back and honour those pioneers that have given you the freedom to work and to actually pray and to actually follow something that is so good and right for you. So for me, Lilydale is a special place. So I don't know how many of you were aware that all this took place in the United States of America. Where do you think it began? Everybody thinks it began in England. And it's so lovely for me to see people go, what? The USA? What? How did it begin here? And yet it did. The very essence of what we are doing today comes from those 2 great occasions, the Fox sisters and Lilydale, and Emma travelling all across the country. So what a wonderful heritage I believe we have. But thank you very much, United States, for giving us the chance to be able to have the freedom to be who we are. If I could go to the next slide. It's not only females and ordinary people that became interested in mediumship, because the prominent scientists of the day actually got involved. And they were very interested in the subject because they felt they should be able to capture the voice of the spirit on a piece of equipment. They wanted to get it on, they wanted sound, they wanted image, so that they actually could see the spirit world and actually could hear the voice. No one ever really managed to do that. Nobody actually achieved it. But however, we have the foundations of many of our great inventions as a result. For instance, you take, it's normal for you to have a mobile phone, normal for you to have a telephone in your house. Without those scientists, investigating spiritualism and the mediumship, you wouldn't have had a telephone. Radiograms and radios have come into being because those scientists believed that we were talking to people in another world, and they believed they could capture it. So every time you switch on your television, you'll have to say thank God for mediums. Because actually that's how they got the cathode ray, and it was because these scientists were investigating mediums. And what a wonderful, wonderful help we have. I'm not too sure about the mobile phones. I think we use them too much. Okay, but you know, when you look at that and you see how many scientists actually believed in it, it makes you very, very much aware of the tests and the examination and the research that those mediums had to go through, because they just weren't taken on face value. They really were actually put through their paces to make sure they were not frauds, that it was right. So the scientists really proved that we can be spiritualists and mediums, and that's a good thing. If we move on to number 5 now, we're going very fast through this, aren't we? But I'm trying to cover everything that I can. Throughout the ages, since modern day spiritualism began and mediumship became popular, politicians, royalty in both our countries have actually investigated spiritualism and mediumship. We know, for instance, that mediums are very much involved when war is taking place, because what they do is they go to talk to the unseen world to see if they can give us solutions. And I'm sure that it's all done behind closed doors, but we do know that Queen Victoria, who never got over losing Albert, had her own medium that actually would often travel with her throughout the country. We also are aware of Lincoln, who had a connection to mediums. So you see, we're not so badly off as people. And Churchill. Now with Winston Churchill, there was a medium that was prisoned in England, was put in prison in England because of predicting, because her predictions were so right that they couldn't afford to let her be out in public. So she was put in jail. And Churchill, it is said, went and talked to her and actually had many a sitting with her. So you can imagine what happened from there. We've got eminent authors and free thinkers that have investigated spiritualism. And it's a wonderful thought, isn't it, to think that these people that we hold in high esteem actually go and investigate and are keeping their minds open to the understanding that they can get help and comfort and support from an unseen world. And I think that that's very, very important, and important to you and I. Wouldn't it be lovely to think that now that you're coming up to your vote like we do in England for government, that someone in the world of the spirit is influencing so that we get the right presidents and we get the right people in government. Wouldn't it be lovely? And perhaps that's something we should all be working for, because that's the only way we're going to find our peace. Slide 6. It's about the authors, the free thinkers again. And you know, some of our best speakers, our best public speakers were men. We're just lagged behind a bit, ladies, on that one. All right. And it's strange because in the beginning it was ladies, then it went to gentlemen, then it went back to ladies, and now we've got more males involved. And they are very good speakers and authors. So we've got these authors that really have worked to help us to convince people that really talking to the spirit world is not a bad thing at all. So you've got Arthur Conan Doyle. Now he's the Sherlock Holmes man. So I wonder if he had a link with the spirit world when he was writing that. But he wasn't a medium. He was a speaker. He believed in the truth of spiritualism. He believed in the truth of life after death. And he wrote books about it, but he never demonstrated it. So he never had that personal link with the spirit world to give to another person. We don't know why, but it never ignited. But it's actually the same if we're talking about Arthur Findlay. Arthur Findlay was another gentleman that never became a medium, but actually after all his research and investigation into mediums and listening to mediums talk and sitting in the seances sometimes and the trance work, he actually started to promote spiritualism, and he's wrote many books. On the Edge of the Etheric, which you can see there, many of his books. For me, they're a little bit dry, but then again, I like fiction. But they're a bit dry, but they're well worth reading and studying if you're interested, because it has a strong spiritual philosophy at the back of it with facts to go with it. So I like to think that these men who went out and spread the word without demonstrating it, they must have really have believed in their religion, mustn't they, and the science. And they did believe that it was a religion and a science, not just one. So when we look at that, there's some lovely books that are factually written. And I don't mean these modern day ones, look at the old ones. There's one book that was written by Conan Doyle. I'm sorry, not by Conan Doyle, another man that we haven't got there. And he actually researched his son. His son died in the war. And he got so many wonderful contacts from his son that he actually then started to scientifically investigate mediums and mediumship. So it's quite a wonderful opportunity for you and I to know that we have a faith, we have a belief that has been proved. We also, to conclude, can say that we have God on our side, which is lovely. So the other aspects of our religion is that we not only prove life after death, but the philosophical truth that we have takes on board all religions. You can hear someone from the spirit world talking about the Bible. You can hear someone talking about the Quran. You can hear some people talking about all the Jewish ways. Because what it is it's brought all the purity of religion together, and it's set men free from dogma. And it's allowed people to recognize that you don't need somebody stood here for you to have a contact with your God, because that God is within you. So the major thing that I believe throughout all the history that has developed, bringing us up to this time with spiritualism, is the freedom for us to be at peace with our God, and to know that God is not a jealous, angry God, but is a God of peace and of love and compassion. And I believe mediums are here not to tell you to marry that fifth husband, or that you're going to get this, that we see so much. That's not mediumship at all. That's not what it's about. What it is actually about is really just to tell you God did not take someone from you because you've done something wrong. And quite often, you know, when you lose someone, you think, why did God do that to me? Am I such a bad person that God would do that? And I believe that it's that kind of setting men free from the dogmas that really is supportive of the work that mediums do. Saying that God is there in every fibre of your being, but every part, every minute part of your life, there is that solace and support and upliftment that comes from the God source. And that you don't need to go to a minister, you only need to go and stand by a tree, you only need to be near a river or the sea, wherever you love to be. You cannot be where God is not. And that's the beauty of it. And I walk into this wonderful building, and it is the living embodiment that God is everywhere. So for me, that loving relationship that I have with God through the period of my life has given me upliftment, it's given me confidence, it's given me peace in times of great grief and hardship and pain, and know that I am at one with that peace. And you know, we do have to go through transitions, you and I. There are going to be things happening in our life that you and I are not going to enjoy and we're not going to like. There's no doubt about that. But the word of the Spirit is that God loves you just the way you are. And as long as we are doing our very, very best for each other, helping each other, caring for each other, then this wonderful work that is of God will continue. So that's how I see my religion. My religion is a religion of peace with a scientific twist. But mark my words, the greatest potential of that is that I am loved by God and by that unseen world that is endeavouring to help all of us, you and I, to grow. And I believe every person that lives comes here with an architect's plan. I believe, from what I can gather from the teachers in the spirit world, that each and every one of us is given a responsibility for humanity. Whether it be to be a medium, whether it be to be a nurse, a mother, whether it to be a singer, whether it to be a speaker and a minister, whether it's to be someone who just is there for other people. But I believe we are all here with a task that's being assigned by God. And if we go into the silence and into the stillness of our minds and our thinking, we may hear the still small voice of God saying, "Well done." Often you won't know when the best of you is shining. But mark my words, that's all that God sees. And I know we are a great mosaic, you and I. We are each part of one another. We are all part of one stupendous whole, whose body nature is but God, the soul. Thank you.